There was this girl who felt tall. She was separate by choice. She was not unhappy. She felt as if she were looking down, observing her own life on a map. She lived in a long story in a big book, on a shelf alongside the books and lives of others. She had never lived alone, and she relied on those other books and bookends for safety and security. There was this boy who felt small. He was separated by circumstance, his own and that of others. He was often unpredictable, and he had a secret sadness. He could remember small things about the time when he was 3 years old, and he knew about big things like human systems theory and the lessons from Friedman's fables. He was loved and appreciated by many people, and at the same time he was confused by and uncertain how to think about himself and the others. At a certain point, they found themselves on the same shelf, side by side. They had shared it for a very long time, until one day there was a sudden and violent shaking. He fell off the shelf. He was replaced next to her, and he looked the same, but he was not. And then he was, and then he wasn't. The boy and the girl are now a man and a woman. They have been side by each for almost 30 years. Music, art, and community are their commonality. He plays traditional music on the banjo. She's a visual and performing artist who does work mostly with others. They both have much experience in the homeless services community. He is a trained professional counselor and caseworker. Hers is on-the-job training based in intuition and creativity. They are both good thinkers, connectors, and innovators. Everything changed on the morning of February 15th. He fell in the bathroom. They didn't know it was because of a stroke. He seemed almost fine. He walked to work, and then he walked home. She found him in the evening, disoriented and in denial about doctors and rehab and the journey toward a gradual recovery. So it's a different brain for him, a different role for her. He tried but was not able to return to work. He is gradually moving toward a new normal and figuring out what it means to regain independence. He has learned to drive again. He reads, he thinks, he researches the injury and the research and the treatment and the options for purpose and connection. Anxiety often steals his motivation and focus, and he cannot yet find or refine his purpose. And he's home a lot. She continues to work on projects in a tiny home office with a computer, bookshelves, and a washing machine in the closet. She juggles and dances and sidesteps with him and around him. With him and around him. She is slowly learning to be less impatient, less argumentative, more clear about boundaries, and more creative about distracting and distancing for him and for her. She is learning how and when to advocate and navigate for him and for herself. She does have support and help from colleagues, artists, students, and a therapist, and he's home a lot. They are committed even though even as they are challenged. Neither has ever been prone to leaving difficult situations. Still, in the day-to-day, he leaves the room with angry words and noisy feet. And she often escapes into tears and frustration. Stories from the past play in his head without the ability to forgive himself or the others. I think together they are writing a new book. They seem to be writing and reading in real time. It's a long book of days and patience and process. He struggles to place himself in his own story, even as pharmaceuticals complicate and frustrate him and stories from the past play in his head. She reminds himself that he has always been cautious and slow to decide or act or let go. She continues to write chapters that may not include him. She's learning about the necessity of mental distance and time separation. She has discovered the elastic in the strings that are attached. She hopes he will too. Fairy tales do not include a meta platform where you can see the whole story. They only move forward toward the end or the moral. In real tales, the steps are small. They are forward and they are backward. The lesson might not be clear, and there might not be a happily ever after. His road is not yet on a map, and he does require travel assistance. She has multiple paths that go out and come back on a continuous line that goes around the world. They are still on the shelf. They look over the edge, look back at each other, separate but together. The art of the everyday journey.